Well, hello class, and welcome to week 6 of BACC 531 Managerial Accounting. Hope that each of you are having a great week so far, that things are going well for you as your week opens up and as you begin this content for this particular week together. This week we're going to be examining 3 chapters, 3 distinct units of content in Managerial Accounting, including Chapter 10, dealing with the topic of performance measurement in decentralized organizations, Chapter 11, examining differential analysis, and then Chapter 12, examining capital budgeting decisions and the analytical process behind the strategic allocation of capital resources. With regard to Chapter 10, looking at the nature of performance measurement in decentralized organizations, we begin by examining and understanding the fact that organizations have varying structures, and that's not just a matter of the basic org chart. Are there managers, assistant managers, general managers, vice presidents, executive or senior vice presidents, and so on and so forth? That's a common reality for most organizations. There are management tiers, there are different levels of management, and with those different levels of management come different levels of authority. It is this latter dimension that we really hone in on when it comes to an examination of centralized versus decentralized organizations. It's not just a question of does the organization have managers. Virtually every organization has management. The question is, how is authority and decision-making responsibility structured, organized, and vested in those different tiers of management? To frame it in a very just down-to-earth way, how much power does a first tier, or what we might say a manager in the trenches, a first-level manager have in comparison to the chief executive officer? How does the CEO, the chief executive officer's power, differ from a mid-level manager, a departmental or a division manager, depending on structure? The nature of centralization and decentralization is asking the question, how much meaningful decision-making authority is vested at different levels within the organization? Is that authority largely centralized at the top? Is that authority distributed, or is that authority largely decentralized? Answering that question is the beginning step, or the beginning part of the process of the follow-through that comes with reporting, control, and exercising management responsibilities within varying organizations in relation to those structures and those power constructs. So Chapter 10 is going to look at the nature of how we can measure and assess performance in a meaningful, effective, and helpful way, in particular in decentralized organizations where power and decision-making authority is distributed throughout the management structure. In Chapter 11, looking at the nature of differential analysis, this is a vitally important chapter and a vitally important concept because differential analysis gets to the heart of how we make decisions, how we choose between decision alternatives. Put simply, differential analysis is simply quantifying the bottom line dollar value difference between decision alternative A or decision alternative B. We recognize that varying decisions within an enterprise has varying consequences in terms of revenues, costs, and the resultant amount of profit that may or may not be brought in, or the resultant amount of loss. Every decision has consequences. Differential analysis is an attempt to, in a disciplined, meaningful way, quantify those differences, to quantify those consequences, and then compare that, again, in a disciplined, meaningful way, to evaluate and determine what is the best decision outcome with everything brought into our examination lens. From one perspective, that's relatively common sense. I'll often have students at both the undergraduate and the graduate level, when we talk about differential analysis, that will point out, isn't that a common sense concept, Dr. Brock? From a big picture standpoint, it can be, and in many cases, differential analysis is largely common sense. How much money is this going to save us? How much money is this going to cost us? How much revenue is this going to bring in? This being the decision alternative relative to other choices. In other cases, however, it's not quite as simple as just putting a few dollars and cents together. Differential analysis can examine decisions that are enormously complex, alternatives that have a great deal of complexity. It is that latter reality that we want to turn our attention to looking in Chapter 11, a question of how do we deal with complexity that exists in varying decision alternatives and quantifying that in a meaningful and a disciplined way. Finally, with Chapter 12, we'll examine capital budgeting decisions, the process of determining how we're going to make long-term strategic investments. The reality that we need to invest in a business enterprise to secure long-term lasting investments that will empower our business, expand opportunities on the horizon, or maintain existing opportunities, that is a fairly straightforward concept. The difficulty is when resources are limited, as they are for every organization on earth, how we take limited resources, the capital that is available to be spent, to be invested, and how we allocate that in the best possible way. How can we take the amount of capital available for investment and invest that in a manner which produces the best return in terms of our varying strategic alternatives? Capital budgeting is the process that we use for not just doing that, but doing that well. Chapter 12 is thus going to focus in on the process of not just engaging in capital budgeting from a big picture standpoint, but dealing with the inherent complexities, the inherent opportunities, and the nature of trying to rank, to order, and to evaluate various investment alternatives, and to empower you as a manager, as an executive, as a leader, to make the best decision to invest in the best possible way in the service of the organization that you're leading, or the division or the subcomponent that you're managing or you're engaged with on a professional basis. So much for us to examine this week. Again, a little heavier load with regard to 3 chapters worth of content, but some fascinating and some interesting things we're going to journey through together. In the way of graded assignments this week, you will have 3 that are going to be required. In addition to your narrated PowerPoint slides and the concept overview videos that have been provided for you, you will have graded assignments including the Week 6 reading assignment in Connect, the Week 6 lecture video quiz that you'll take through Connect, and then finally your Week 6 exercises. As you work through those, as always, if you have any questions, please reach out and I'll be glad to help and to assist with those. You can reach me by email at jake.brock@ucumberlands.edu, and I'll look forward to hearing from you. With that, thanks for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your week ahead.